May I humbly request Ms. R. Vaigai to address the gathering. Ma'am, please.
Good morning and greetings to all of you. I must at the outset congratulate the government of Kerala in having organized a seminar on such an important issue as part of its Keraleeyam celebrations, and thank all of you to have given me the opportunity to come and be part of your celebrations. We are today meeting at a very critical juncture in our national development and also international development. The government, the union government, has made its intentions very clear that on whose side it is. It is on the side of capital, and we are operating in a market economy, and the union is also moving far away from democratic rights. You have various instances of communalism, and as Justice Chandru pointed out today, it has become seditious even to say Inqilab Zindabad. The electoral bonds, so many methods of subversion of democracy is happening, and the parliament and the union government through the parliament have now devised a very dangerous method of reducing the workers' rights by the 4 new codes, which is a compilation according to the government of 29 labor legislations, which actually on the core areas of workers' rights defeat the rights of the workers, take away the rights of the unions, and push us back to more than a century before of the regime of hire and fire. Because the new labor codes reduce the regulations, because market economy believes in less regulation by the state. They don't want any regulation by the labor department or by the government. They want to operate, the capital wants to operate freely and for the profit motive. So there is a kind of a autocracy that we are witnessing. And let us remember on whose side this government is. In the international arena, India was one among the first to announce that we stand with Israel and not with Palestine. That is the unfortunate part. So this meeting, I think, is crucial for all of us to realize that Kerala stands for workers' rights, and we have to reinforce that, and we have to send a very strong message to the union, to the rest of the country, that let us remember that there cannot be a democracy where there is no workers' participation. If there is no workers' participation, what kind of a democracy is that? And there cannot be any human rights without respecting the workers' rights and giving the worker a fair wages and conditions of service. The entire May Day struggle was over conditions of work, 8 hours work. Unfortunately, today the government wants to reverse all that trend, negate all those struggles and achievements, and it wants to say increase the condition, the hours of work to 10 hours, 12 hours, unregulated. It wants to reduce the voice of the unions in negotiations by saying that only a union which has 50% membership will be recognized and not otherwise. So other unions cannot, minority unions cannot operate, you will not have any right to represent. So these are all very dangerous trends. Now, as far as Kerala is concerned, Kerala has had many welfare legislations. Fortunately for us, Labour still continues to be in the concurrent list. So the state government is empowered under the constitution to make its own laws. So we don't have to merely follow the parliamentary law for labour regulation or labour welfare or labour benefits. We can have our own laws, and Kerala has very many laws. Even as far as Industrial Disputes Act is concerned, you have states like UP, which is a BJP ruled state, Maharashtra and several other states, Madhya Pradesh, who have their own acts. So what I want to point out is Kerala has, particularly towards the unorganized sector, there are so many beneficial provisions. Some of the provisions need to be strengthened, and I just want to share some of my views on how the labor legislation can be improved and how vigilance can be increased in order to ensure that compliance is there. For example, the new laws say that the Standing Orders Act need not apply to smaller establishments. It has to apply only if an establishment has got more than 100 workers. So that means an employer can have whatever rule of service, conditions of work. He can say work for 10 hours, 12 hours, there's no regulation. Hours of work is not determined, and because it's not a factory. So many of the beneficial rules and conditions of work which are governing workers today will not be implemented because the employer need not have any announced or published regulations or rules for service conditions, which is a very dangerous trend. He can also say, I don't like you today, I stop you from work. You can't question that because you are bound by the conditions of service. Because the new code says every employer shall issue an appointment order and will also say what is the condition of service. That's it. You're not governed by the law. So an employer can say, I can terminate you without any notice, without any advance month's salary, nothing at all. So these are very dangerous provisions. Now I would suggest that the Kerala government has its own state amendments to the 4 codes that have been introduced by the union government to impose restrictions. See, what happens is any less regulation means more profits for the employer and less benefits for the worker. Today in the new act, what is suggested is there need not be inspection by the labor inspectors. The employer can just voluntarily declare that he is paying minimum wages, that he is complying with the factory's rules, that he is complying with the standing orders, that he is checking the health status of the workers. All that is only a matter of self-declaration. Now I want to ask, if I want to make more profits, why will I comply with these regulations? I will just give a self-declaration and say I am complying with all that, file it with the Labour Department and say that's it. And there is no inspection unless a complaint arises. So this is a very dangerous amendment that has been introduced by the new labour legislation, labour code. Now I request the Kerala government, since the labour minister is here, I request the Kerala government to ensure that there is periodical inspection. Number of inspectors must be increased. I am told that the labour inspectors are under the factories department and not the labour department. But there are so many other industries in non-factories also where compliance with labour laws are necessary. Therefore, inspection by the factories inspectors, periodical inspection at least every 6 months should be made compulsory, and hours of work benefits to the workers, all these must be ensured through regular inspection. The trade union rights also must be secured as prior to the new codes. I understand that the Kerala government has introduced several rules under the new codes, but I would request some of those rules must be changed, and particularly as far as the trade union recognition and the workers' participation in management policies and laying down conditions of work, formulating standing orders, negotiating with the workers on increase in wages and several working conditions. All that must be ensured, because there cannot be any democratic government, and I am sure the Kerala government will follow that, in ensuring that there is workers' participation on the negotiating table as far as workers' issues are concerned, regarding wages, bonus, and several other conditions of work. There is one other aspect on which I wanted to share my views. Kerala has been a forerunner in protecting unorganized workers' rights, and women constitute the major portion of the unorganized workers. And women's rights have got to be secured. Now, I find that there is a legislation in Kerala which protects the rights of domestic workers, and an insurance, health insurance for those workers, and certain conditions of service are laid down in that law. One of the rules says that the domestic worker must contribute to this fund, the welfare fund. The domestic worker, out of her salary, has to contribute to this welfare fund so that she gets the benefit of the health insurance, pension, and whatever it is. Now, domestic workers in our country are paid even less than minimum wages. I think it is really too much harsh a condition to impose contribution by the domestic workers to this fund for their welfare. The contribution to the fund, as stated in the law, is a grant by the government, contribution by the workers, and contribution by the agencies, manpower agencies which employ the domestic workers. But in our country, not every domestic worker is engaged by manpower agencies. Particularly in urban areas, every household will have a domestic worker. Every apartment complex has a domestic worker. Every gated community employs not less than 200 domestic workers. Why not impose a health cess on those apartments and buildings and gated communities to contribute to this fund? Because it is these domestic workers who are servicing these buildings, residential buildings, apartments, and gated communities to remain clean, to service their daily needs, everything. And these domestic workers, there is no guarantee that they are paid minimum wages, there is no guarantee that their service conditions are ensured. They don't have even maternity benefits. Now, Maternity Benefits Act should be extended to domestic workers, and the cess should be collected from the owners of residential building, apartments, and large gated communities. It could be a staggered figure or slab rate, like how property taxes are imposed. Large buildings, you impose larger tax. Smaller buildings, you impose smaller taxes. Like that, a health cess should be imposed in urban areas to be contributed for the health and welfare of the domestic workers, and should be collected from the owners of the houses and apartments and buildings. That's what I want to say. The other thing is, there cannot be a proper opportunity or equality at work, and equal opportunity for women at work, unless there is a safe working condition. Despite the slogan of Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao by the union government, violence against women has increased. That is a reality in today's society. Therefore, every woman who steps out of the house is faced, there is a danger, there is a risk of violence. Unfortunately, as Justice Chandru said, many a times labor legislations have been interpreted wrongly, I would say, by the courts themselves. And unfortunately, the Kerala High Court, in the Women's Cinema Collective case, have given a judgment that the Sexual Harassment, Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Work Act does not apply to cinema actors associations, technicians associations, etc., etc. It applies only to the production unit, because you have to have an employer in order to enforce the act, is what the Kerala High Court through the Chief Justice's bench has held. Now, what I say is this is a completely wrong understanding of the law. The Sexual Harassment Act has come into force pursuant to India's agreeing to comply with the UN Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women. Now, that does not say only employers should not harass. It says state shall ensure that women are safe outside in the society and in the workplaces. Now, the High Court itself has an anti-sexual harassment policy to protect the lawyers, litigants, clients, everybody who comes there. Now, lawyers are not employees of the High Court. Clients are not employees of the High Court. The Supreme Court has said medical counsel has to ensure sexual harassment is not practiced, and there has got to be an internal complaints committee. Bar councils, lawyers associations, we have to have an internal complaints committee. Similarly, I would suggest that the Kerala government should pay attention to this aspect of the matter to ensure that women feel safe, and internal complaints committees are ensured even through associations and cooperatives of employees themselves, where members are employees themselves. You have to have an internal complaints committee in order to prevent these kind of harassment, so that women's participation is increased. I also understand that women are not in higher positions in organized and unorganized sector. That is a matter which has got to be paid attention, because increase in women workforce is necessary so that you have a fair representation of women and they contribute to the production. Unfortunately, there seems to be some traditional idea that women are not capable of supervisory jobs and greater production jobs in manufacturing sector also, which is most unfortunate. For example, I found one judgment where bus conductors were not women, supervisors were not women, even electricity board in the Kerala government was not offering jobs to women as in the lower grades. Now, all that should be ensured that there is an equal participation of women. Now, I have to finish. There is a lot more to contribute. One aspect, only one aspect I want to mention here, since the Labour Minister is here. There is a provision in the new code on dangerous activities and hazardous operations by factories. Now, what we found in Tamil Nadu, and I am sure that must be true in all other states also, that the Labour Department is not competent to really inspect the dangerous activities and the hazardous activities in the factories, because workers are exposed to occupational health hazards. Particularly, there is no inspection of women's health. I dealt with a case of a hazardous industry in Tamil Nadu where women were not subjected to health inspection at all, on the ground that they were not engaged in actual production, whereas the hazardous fumes were spreading all over the factory. Now, the labor inspectors have got to be trained on industrial safety and pollution checks, so that the workers' health is protected. It is important. More and more hazardous industries will come into being. Even sectors like IT, there's no regulation of their conditions of work here. All over India, and many of the IT sector workers end up working for 10 hours or 12 hours, which affects their health, their family life, and in the long run, their life is spoiled. Now that has got to be ensured, and I wish the Kerala government all success in this celebration of Keraleeyam, as well as its future endeavors for workers' welfare and securing that the workers of this country really steal a march in the democratic processes. And the government should lead its way for the rest of the countries in setting a benchmark and a standard on workers' benefits and rights. Thank you.
Madam, you are validly raised a point that without proper enforcement, entire labor laws will be a nullity. Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.